Right, we're going to change the order just a little bit and hear next from Kyle Roberts, the Executive Director of the Congregational Library and Archives. So Kyle works right next door to the Boston Athenaeum, which is right across the street from the Massachusetts State House where I worked. So I think John first mentioned that it's all connected, which happens to be my motto, and now you're going to see how everything that we talk about today is connected. Since he arrived here in Boston in 2022, after serving as Associate Director of Library and Museum Programming at the American Philosophical Society Library in Philadelphia, an organization founded by Benjamin Franklin, and where I also worked before moving to the Boston area. So there again, another example of how everything is connected. Under Kyle's leadership, the Congregational Library, which many, many Bostonians had never heard of, it's true, it significantly increases outreach and public programming to audiences far more broad than people who belong to the Congregational Church. So their current exhibition, called Sacred Rebellion, Congregationalists in Revolutionary Massachusetts, is well worth a visit. So please welcome Kyle Roberts.
Well, thank you so much, Beth, for putting this together. You know, I think on the theme of connectedness, I'm sitting in the front row and I'm seeing all my fantastic colleagues and I'm looking at what they're showing and I'm like, oh yeah, we have some of that, and we have some of that, and we have some of that. So, you know, apologies for the repetition, but I think it really speaks to how wonderful Boston is as a collecting, in New England as a collecting hub. And I encourage all of you to go to all of our institutions because you're going to find something a little different, but are there various parts of the puzzle. I think it's kind of fun to put those pieces together. So I start with a glass lantern slide. You might not be familiar with this, but there's this whole kind of genre of snuff photography of meeting houses that have hit misfortune. So this one, a large wind came up and knocked the steeple into the roof. To me, it looks a little bit like an ice cream cone, which is now making me hungry. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about finding ephemera in a religious library. For those of you who are not familiar with us, the Congregational Library and Archives fosters a deeper understanding of the congregational story and its ongoing relevance to contemporary society. And we do this in two ways, maybe what we might call the more traditional library function, by collecting, preserving, and sharing materials and resources. And then what we might call sort of the proto-research library component by actively engaging with faith communities, students, scholars, and the general public. We get a lot, oh, you're the Congregational Library because you're across the street from the State House, and well, we do have some political things in there, no. For those of you who are kind of drawing a blank, like Congregationalism, what's that? Well, if I tell you that we're the descendants of the Puritans and the Pilgrims, some more head nods, yep. So we exist today, we're an independent research library that works with three denominations, the United Church of Christ, the National Association of Congregational Christian Churches, and the Conservative Congregational Christian Conference. So we are, a great place where all of these faiths come together, representing about 1 million worshipers and 5,000 churches across the country. And our physical location is at 14 Beacon Street. If you look to the left, you can see John's fantastic building. Our building was built in 1898. We've been there ever since. We're on the second floor. And you can come visit us Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Please just swing by. It's always great if you want to do some research to make an appointment in advance, just so we can have some things pulled out for you to see. When this was built, this was supposed to be meant to be really the world headquarters for our faith. I imagine there'd be kind of a spinning globe on the top that would say, come here, meet missionaries from around the world, come see our library, come to see our printing press, come see the There was a lecture hall in the basement. That lecture hall has now been repurposed, and you can see that as well as collection storage space for the Boston Athenaeum, speaking to our long and fruitful relationship. I recently developed an architectural tour for our building, and one of the first things I found was a minor disagreement with our neighbors at the Athenaeum about us building our building a little over their lot line. But John and I have known each other probably for 20 years now through various ways, so I think we're pretty cool. So, our online location, you've heard a lot today about these institutions' digital archives. Our online location gets many more visitors. If you go to congregationallibrary.org, you can find information about how to visit us, how to bring a tour in. Our Connect section has a range of different ways that you can follow us, follow our social media, or be on our email list. We send out a lot of emails, 140 last year, so you might consider us your friendly neighborhood spammer. We realize that our audience is national and international. There are Congregationalists literally everywhere. So we do a lot of online talks, online exhibitions, and conferences. Under our Collections tab, you can find all sorts of resources. You can find our online catalog, link to our digital archive, and many of our finding aids. In our research section, and I'll talk a little bit about this in a minute, we have our New England's Hidden Histories Project, which is a fantastic online digital archive of church materials that's now 20 years old. Also a Black and Indigenous research guide. We are particularly committed to helping those doing family history to find records of their enslaved ancestors, many of which were often written out of the record in the 19th century. So we go back to the original materials to find those. Now, we were founded in 1853 at a time when many of the other religious groups in the country had already formed historical societies and denominations. Congregationalists, as a kind of our kind of core principle, is the autonomy of the local congregation. We are very fiercely protective of that. So it was really hard to figure out how you form a national organization when you're all focused on the individual community. But somehow they figured it out in 1853. When they decided to form a national organization, they decided they needed two things: a church building and loan to provide money to build new churches, as well as a historical society. And so that was our beginnings. Our collection began with 56 books from 8 donors. One of the fun discoveries for me when I was just starting here was the lore was, 56 books by 8 donors, 56 books. I'm like, oh, can I see the list? They're like, oh, we don't know what the list is. We've just repeated 56 many times, so we believe it. So I told this, I was saying to my archivist, well, if you could find that list, it'd be really great. And a year later, he found it in reprocessing a collection. And we did a whole online exhibit about it. So if you're curious, if you're going to start a library in 1853, what are the 56 books you need? The fun part about doing this was realizing, there's a bunch of ephemera in there. There's a bunch of publications that might not have been saved if it wasn't for kind of the desire to sweep up things and to make sure they're preserved. The other part that was really fascinating is how many of the themes of our current work are found back then 175 years ago. So activism. Congregationalists have always been on the forward edge of social justice. So there's materials on slavery and education and temperance. There are so many sermons. We have 19,000 and counting sermons in our collection. Works of theology, works of history, and then works of foundational figures. So have you all heard of this guy named Cotton Mather? So Cotton Mather's collection, we have one of the nation's leading collections of his imprints. He printed over 400 books, so it's going to be impossible to collect all of them. We have a good percentage of them in our collection. If I put a virtual program on about Cotton Mather, 100 people sign up on the first day. Like, there's just this kind of wonderful obsession with him, and it goes back all the way to 1853. We also have fascinating materials in that original collection on the intersection of politics, about faith and society. My 23-year-old nephew was very excited there was a book on the Illuminati, because apparently we can't shake the Illuminati. They have always been with us, and they're always exciting. Our holdings are not as big as some of the other institutions you're hearing from today, but sizable still. 150,000 printed works, 1,100 plus manuscript collections, and then our fastest growing collection of digital materials, and we have 130,000 digital pages representing several thousands of digital objects. I'll say I've been a little jealous up here as I've heard this refrain, oh, in our catalog, in our catalog, in our catalog. Well, we're doing an inventory right now, and we discovered that 1/3 of our print collections are not in our catalog. So, if you're interested in our materials, reach out, email us, talk to the librarian, talk to the archivist. Odds are that we probably do have something, even if you can't find it in the catalog. Our collections are national and global in scope. Some postcards up here of churches across the country. A reminder that we're not just a New England phenomenon. The pictures down below represent the missionary activities of the Congregational Church, which went pretty much everywhere in the world. These are photos of survivors of the Armenian genocide who were gathered together in an orphanage in Corinth, Greece, by a pioneering missionary. So just a broad range of these types of materials. Our New England's Hidden Histories project, like I said, has been gathering materials for 20 years. There's 130,000 scanned pages of manuscript records and over 25,000 pages of transcript. So who knew that we would be sitting here in 2026 realizing that people don't learn how to write cursive anymore and that it is becoming a foreign language? So that's why we have been transcribing all of those years, realizing that if you don't transcribe, it's actually a barrier to accessibility. We are also expanding our efforts to start thinking about how artificial intelligence might be able to help us with some of these transcriptions. So stay tuned. So Beth approached me, what was it? Was it last fall when you were thinking about this panel? Okay, no idea. It feels like yesterday. so the assignment was find ephemera in our collections. So I accepted the invite. I was pretty sure I was going to find lots of ephemera. It just had to be there. So I went to the online catalog, typed in ephemera, and got 27 returns out of 100,000 items listed. So then I started swearing a little to myself. I'm like, oh crap, do I have anything to say about ephemera? And what becomes fascinating is that this is as much about understanding how library professionals think about their collections as it is about the materials that are actually there. So what do I mean by that? Well, there are 27 hits, and there are a couple patterns that emerge. There are 5 collections that are sort of named ephemera, or that have a subject heading ephemera. And then there are 4 tracks, comma, or parentheses, ephemera. So what this tells me is that I had maybe a current staffer or maybe a previous staffer who really liked the word ephemera and put it in occasionally, but that we have not systematically identified our material as ephemera. And I think that's really important because I wouldn't want any of you to go to our catalog and think, oh, well, it's just not there. It's just we haven't been using that way of identifying it. It helps me in doing talks like this to understand, all right, well, how do we need to get better? How do we need to change this? So my staff maybe haven't been consistent in naming things ephemera, and the term ephemera in general hasn't been used by our collection. But there is a ton of ephemera in our collection. You just need to figure out how to find them. So afraid that Beth was going to be mad at me, I was like, all right, I should look up what is the definition. Now, I actually thought all the presentations were going to have this image up there because I think it's wonderful. This is from the Ephemera Society of America's site. What is ephemera? Well, it's anything short-lived or transitory. I don't have John's language abilities, so I don't have a lot to do with ephemerate, but it's a fun word. The website is fantastic. It goes on and says that ephemera is precious primary source information. The bits and bobs of vintage and current, usually paper items. Much of it was expected to be briefly used and then discarded. So if you scroll down on the site, then you get over 100 different things that are ephemera, and we have 42. Now we have 42 that are things that I knew off the top of my head as I was looking at the list. I'm like, oh yep, I could find you a real photo postcard, I could find you a receipt, I could find you printing. Not on this list, surprisingly, and Beth, I think you should update this, is tattoos. If you want tattoos, you'll only find them on my staff. They do last a long time. So there are two places where you can find a ephemera that came to mind that I just wanted to share with you briefly today. First is in our exhibitions. So we have a new exhibition up called Sacred Rebellion, Congregationalists in Revolutionary Massachusetts. And the exhibition, which was funded by a generous grant from the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism, is an opportunity for people to remember that Congregationalists embraced a theological justification for the revolution. They believed that God favored them and that their cause was morally justified, that it was, in fact, a sacred rebellion. Consensus, though, was often very difficult to achieve, and implementation proved difficult and unsatisfactory to many, especially those on the margins. And that Congregationalists, for the 250 years since 1776, really have wrestled with the implications of the legacy of the war for all who fought in it. These exhibitions are a wonderful way, right, to jump in and start to see the materials that we have in our collection. So we see almanacs, like you can see up here, the virtuous patriot at the hour of death. And it was that image in the upper left corner which became the little angel that was our signature image. Almanacs are a wonderful way of understanding the past. As you can see, this one is pretty beat up. Many don't survive because they were meant to be used for a year and then tossed. Hey, you can use ephemera as wallpaper. That's pretty great. So this is Paul Revere's 1768, a view of part of the town of Boston in New England and the British ships of war landing their troops. We had initially thought about having it just on display in one of the cases, and our designer threw it up on the wall as a surprise. I think it's fantastic. You can kind of see in here the church steeples, which littered the Boston skyline at that time. Broadsides, which we've heard about from other organizations. So none of our broadsides are cataloged. So every time you go in, it's a new opportunity to find something you didn't know. This one, Bloody Butchery by the British troops, or the Runaway Fight of the Regulars, is a fantastic piece and is not dated. So it speaks to, it's propaganda that was created right after the battles of Concord and Lexington. The coffins on the top, I think, are the most dramatic, graphic element. 50 people, actually 50 colonial militia and Minutemen died at Concord and Lexington, but the printer apparently only had 40 coffins, so that's all they put on top. It lists all the folks, as I said, provincial militia and Minutemen who died in the battle. It doesn't list any of the British soldiers who died. And it's kind of fascinating as a broadside because it reprints a newspaper article that's already come out on this. So this is a piece that you would have seen plastered all over Boston. I said it wasn't dated. We had to start looking at it closely to figure out, is it an original from 1775 or is it a later reprint? Well, thanks to our dear friends at the Mass Historical Society, who have a copy of the reprint on their website, we're able to figure out ours is actually probably from 1850. And it's great having this in the exhibit because it's a reminder of the legacy of this imagery. The legacy of the American Revolution extends into political moments. We interpret this as being part of the response to the Fugitive Slave Act in the 1850s. I kind of follow through to say, when authoritarian overreach happens, here is how we respond. One of my favorite pieces in the exhibit is a lottery ticket. Who knew that they tried to fund the American Revolution through a lottery? We have one of the original tickets. When it was first shown to me by the curator, my first question was, oh, can I cash it in? Is it worth anything? Did we forget to redeem it? Turns out the first lottery was a failure. It was not successful. So the minister in Roxbury who bought this ticket just kept it in his collection. And then we have tons and tons of pamphlets. This unassuming pamphlet, Oration Delivered in Corinthian Hall, Rochester, by Frederick Douglass on July 4th, 1852, is in almost pristine condition, was collected by the Ladies' Anti-Slavery Society of Franklin, Massachusetts. When I ask school groups if they have learned this sermon, this oration in their classrooms, they usually say no. And I say, all right, well, are you familiar with it by its other name? What to the American Slave is Your 4th of July? So this is the first edition of Frederick Douglass's seminal 19th century oration. You can also find ephemera in our stacks. There's so much to find. Rewards of Merit. Sarah M. Riss's collection of Sunday school ephemera has some wonderful printing on it. And we are so glad that she decided to save it and give it to us. We don't know a lot about her, but we know this is dates from the 1850s. We have photograph albums, many of which serve a memorial function. Emily C. Wheeler and Ingrid Anderson worked as missionaries in the Middle East and did a significant job trying to connect orphans from the various wars over there with patrons in the United States. And these are some of the children that Emily Wheeler herself adopted. Has full documentation on the kids. On the top, we see a letter purportedly written, dictated by one of the kids. And then we see some of the material that was used to send out to encourage other people to support. And just wonderful, surprising things, like little pieces of fabric that have brought in and put in here into this scrapbook. The Black Congregational story has been woefully under-collected and under-preserved by our institutions, so we are always on the lookout. This rare broadside we acquired last year. It is from 1915, from an effort to create an old folks home in Norfolk, Virginia, by one of the graduates of one of the first Black colleges down in that area. And then the final piece, which I think is one of my archivist's favorite pieces, is just a scrapbook of these patches from World War I and World War II. Each has the name of the church member who earned them, and it's just page after page, which just shows you, being so close to Memorial Day, the sacrifice made by not just congregations, but by all Americans, and the way in which it was so important to preserve that story. So I leave you with that last image in your mind. For reference services, reach out to us at ref@14beacon.org. We take 10 times the number of online requests for research as we do in-person ones, so we're always happy to help, and you can find more information about us here. Thanks so much.